Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the webinar Sustainable Catalyst, the importance of large companies to tourism value chains. I'm Melena Ray, Consumption and Production Officer at the UN Environment, and I will be your moderator during this session. This is the 8th Sustainable Tourism webinar organized by UN Environment and the French government within the frame of the 10YFP Sustainable Tourism Program. That is a collaborative platform which currently involves 130 organizations with a common goal: decoupling tourism growth from the increased use of natural resources. The network offers opportunities to accelerate sustainable consumption and production patterns in the tourism sector and advance the related sustainable development goals, notably SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production, but also on SDG 8, 13, 14, and 15, respectively, on decent work, economic growth, climate action, life below water, and life on land. The network also offers opportunities for members to participate in public fora, discussions, and debates, and gain international visibility. Lastly, the 10YFP Sustainable Tourism Program offers possibilities for members to exchange knowledge, to learn from other partners in the program, share experiences, lessons learned, best practices, and tools. Before we start, I would like to recall a few tips for a smooth session on the GoToWebinar. All attendees are on the listen-only mode. Attendees can send questions to the panelists anytime throughout the webinar by posting them in the question box of the control panel. When typing a question, please indicate to which panelist it is addressed. At the end of the webinar, during the Q&A session, the organizers will be reading out the questions and panelists will share their replies. If you need to contact the organizers for other reasons, example, connection problems, please refrain from using the question box and use the chat box instead of addressing your message to organizers. This session is being recorded. You will receive tomorrow the YouTube link with. Please do not hesitate to share the recording with your colleagues and networks. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change were adopted by the United Nations member states with associated interests from a number of private sector companies and coalitions. The implication for the private sector is particularly important and valuable in delivering those objectives through innovation, responsiveness, and efficiency, and the provision of specific skills and resources. Several business coalitions associated with the negotiations on climate change and SDGs, typically comprised of large multinationals and publicly listed companies with billions of dollars in annual revenues. However, experts note that SMEs are of and microenterprises offering destination-based tourism services to coexist with a small number of large companies. Large companies are well positioned to take into account entire value chains while developing their sustainability strategies. From this perspective, they could play an important role of sustainability catalysts through their relations with subcontractors and suppliers, most of them SMEs. The objective of this webinar is to explore opportunities for large tourism companies in influencing and enhancing the development of sustainable practices within SMEs across value chains. We will now move to the first presentation of today's webinar, for which we have the pleasure to have among us Jane Ashton, Sustainable Development Director of TUI Group PLC. Jane has been driving its spearheading policies to steer TUI's group towards greater sustainability for the last 15 years. She works together with industry peers and organizations on international level to forge a more sustainable tourism industry, and is a member of the advisory committee of the 10YFP Sustainable Tourism Program. Jane, you have 15 minutes. The floor is yours.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'd like to speak a little bit about TUI Group, about how we work to influence our extensive supply chain through our hotels, through our excursions, through our destination projects and collaboration with partners. If I could just explain a little bit about the TUI Group, first of all, for those who don't know us. Next, please. Next slide, please. Some figures about the TUI Group, one of the world's largest tourism companies. Some of the salient facts there are the number of people we employ in more than 100 countries, that's 67,000 people. We have a number of hotels, cruise ships and travel shops, and 20 million customers from 31 source markets to 180 countries worldwide. And as Helena said, SMEs are the backbone of our supply chain. We have a very extensive supply chain, both direct and indirect. In fact, we're aware that our indirect economic impact is even greater than our direct economic impact and sustainability impact. And therefore, we're very much aware of our responsibility as catalysts for sustainable practice. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, our sustainability strategy, which is detailed extensively through our documents and our website, is all about reducing the impact of our own through our supply chain and with our customers, trying to create positive change for people and communities where we operate. Through our partnerships and projects, pioneering sustainable tourism across the world, and for the people working for us, trying to build the best place for people to work. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yep. We have a number of very challenging targets which we have in the public domain to achieve by 2020, cutting the carbon intensity of our own operations, delivering 10 million greener and fairer holidays, so customers staying in hotels which are sustainably certified to Global Sustainable Tourism Council recognised standards, growing our investment in good causes and in innovative projects in destinations, primarily through the TUI Care Foundation, which we have recently founded and expanded channel through our partnerships and collaborations and destinations, and achieving a very high colleague engagement score. Underpinning these are a whole raft of different targets and goals, but these are the headline numbers. Next slide, please. And just the final part of the introduction, increasingly we're finding the UN Sustainable Development Goals a very useful way to both understand the big picture of our material issues and to map our own activities. So it's definitely something we will be addressing more in future, and this itself is just a screen grab of from one of our reports, our 2016 report, where we try to map some of our key initiatives to those goals, but a very useful framework for us as a business to map our activities against. Next slide, please. And again. So, through our hotel supply chain, in our tour operator business portfolio, we actually contractually oblige all suppliers to subscribe and to work towards certification of a GSTC, Global Sustainable Tourism Council, recognised sustainability standard. We find that's challenging. Quite often hotels that we contract put up some resistance. However, we know that those hotels that do go on to achieve sustainability certification become protagonists for sustainability. Nearly always they experience business benefits in terms of cost savings on the environmental impacts, in terms of colleague engagement, in terms of customer satisfaction, and in terms of being highlighted through our brochures and our websites. So there are business benefits for the hotels that we operate through to achieve certification. At the end of last year, we had just under 1,200 hotels which were certified. Having said that, it is a challenging target and it's very much work in progress. It's been a great opportunity to really engage our buyers, our hundreds of buyers and purchasers and destination teams to help support hoteliers through that process. Next slide, please. And just a quick indication here of how sustainability certification can help stimulate more sustainable business practice and engagement of SMEs through the hotel supply chain. I've just highlighted here some of the criteria which hotels have to demonstrate evidence against. These are taken from Travel Life, which is one of the GSTC certification schemes, and the one that we've been working with most closely since 2007. So those criteria there are that locally produced goods should, where practical, be purchased in preference to imported products, that local service providers should be used in preference to national or multinational companies where practicable, that preference is given to purchasing products which are sustainably produced from an environmental perspective, and that the hotel actively distributes its own sustainability policies through its subcontractors and suppliers. So looking to achieve that ripple effect all the way down the value chain. Next slide, please. And again. So through our excursion program, we are also focused on trying to drive more sustainable business practices. All our excursion providers have to abide by our sustainability code of practice for suppliers, but within our excursion program we have a very substantial collection of excursions named the TUI Collection, which was specifically developed to both give guests a true taste of the destination and also bring specific benefits to local communities and local businesses, whilst stepping lightly on the environment. So the TUI Collection Excursions have to meet a range of sustainability criteria, and it's been one of those success stories where more sustainable product has really chimed with our customers. It's been incredibly popular. We had 850,000 customers who actually went on collection excursions last year, which was a huge year-on-year growth. We now have 170 different excursions in over 40 destinations. And just to give you a taste there, these are excursions which are developed in conjunction with our excursion suppliers, who tend to be SMEs often, and they in turn have developed the content of the excursion with community groups. The Coba Maya Traditions excursion in Mexico features restaurant and interaction with both individuals and very small companies and craft producers in Mexico, similar to the Berber Trail, similar to the Taste and Tradition of Rhodes. So a real focus on the engagement, involvement of community members and SMEs. Next slide, please. And again. I mentioned that we also try to empower and engage and upskill SMEs and individuals through collaborations in destinations, and those particularly now channeled through our corporate foundation, an independent foundation called the TUI Care Foundation, which has three focuses on empowering young people, protecting the natural environment, and enhancing local livelihoods and in destinations through tourism, so supporting thriving destinations. And these are the criteria for the projects that initiate with through the TUI Care Foundation, and we've got again a set of pretty challenging commitments that we are working towards by 2020. Next slide, please. And here, I'm sorry, it's rather small actually, but an example of the projects which are currently live through the TUI Care Foundation, a number of which are specifically geared around supporting and building capacity with individuals and with SMEs. So for example, in Croatia, in Jamaica, in Cape Verde, we're working to support local businesses become engaged in the tourism supply chain, excursion suppliers, craft producers, guides, artisans, etc. In Crete, in Lanzarote, we are working specifically with enterprises in areas such as olive oil production, wine production, and making those linkages between our hotels and the local suppliers to try to increase the local produce that's supplied to the hotels. So frequently we find that that's partly the problem, that those linkages are difficult to establish. So there's various projects that we have in place to try and strengthen those linkages. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that's given you a very quick overview. Very happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much, Jane, for sharing with us here today. We look forward to the Q&A session. As reminder to all attendees, please note that you can send questions to Jane from now on through the question box. She will be answering them at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. It's now time to introduce our second presenter, Nicolas Perrin, Program Manager at International Tourism Partnership. Nicolas has worked on corporate social responsibility since 2009. He has graduated from Paris Dauphine University, and he joined UNISPHERE, aiding the implementation of Rio Conventions with UN agency, and then he focused on low carbon and responsible business strategies for the private sector. Nicolas, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to present to you all today. What I'm going to be today is to give you an insight on how the work of the International Tourism Partnership and our hotel members on sustainability trickles down to suppliers and specifically more smaller companies. Next slide, please. Who we are. We're a charity based in the UK, but we work with 14 international hotel brands, which you can see listed here. And that means our collective work reaches more than 30,000 hotels and 1.5 million employees worldwide, which is fantastic for us to promote sustainability. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to be presenting. I'll first tell you a little bit about the fact that the hotel industry specifically is composed of mostly small companies, and I'll have a look at that. Then I'll tell you a little bit about how small companies supply the hotel industry and how large players can influence those smaller companies. I'll focus on food, labor, and services as specific commodities that we look at, and I'll finish by telling you a little bit more about our work and our ITP goals. Next slide, please. So there's one point that I wanted to make in this webinar, and it's about the hotel industry itself. You know, so not everybody knows that the hotel industry is actually based on a majority of small companies. 2/3 of the global hotel supply is not part of a corporate chain. So even though we work with a few giant companies, the likes of Marriott or Accor, the size of the companies in the hotel industry goes very fast down, and very quickly you find much smaller companies. As an example, if you're having a look at on Expedia, you will have 1/5 of the hotels have actually less than 20 rooms. So that makes a lot of independent, smaller hotel chains to work with. And what I wanted to stress here is that the work we do at the International Tourism Partnership strives to help our large members, but also any member, any company, any smaller company who works on sustainability, who doesn't necessarily have the capacity or the teams to focus on sustainability, can use our tools, our measurement initiative on carbon and water, hotel footprinting tool, and the guidance we publish on our website. Next slide, please. This is to give you also a look about give you a look at the value chain supplying the hotel industry. So last year, Accor Hotels did a really interesting study on the socio-economic impacts of large hotel chains on their suppliers and in the communities where they work. And they found out that through their work, they sustain more than 100,000 jobs, directly, indirectly, and induced. And that's around 3 main sectors. That's first through corporate services. That means large hotel chains will provide purchase services from laundry providers, cleaning, security, large buyer or agricultural products for their obvious large food and beverage activity. And it will also support the communities and the public services through wages, as having a lot of employees in the community promotes household spending, and which trickles down to communities, and large hotels paying taxes, which improves public spending in those destinations. And what they found in the same study is that actually 75% of their suppliers were very small enterprises or small and medium enterprises. Next slide, please. Just an overview of the challenges when you look at the value chain and how you can trickle sustainability down, not only through a large hotel portfolio, but also to your suppliers. I mean, the number one challenge is obviously the number of suppliers. If you take an example, to provide the same food product in one large hotel, in certain cases, you will need potentially 5, 10 different suppliers. That becomes apply standards or measuring or reporting. That's an incredible challenge. The second challenge, which is linked to this, is that hotel chains don't all have a single procurement process. It is often fragmented between different regions, and also between different properties. When the portfolios are franchised, you will find that often each individual property will make its own procurement decisions, and that makes it very difficult to have a unique corporate strategy on influencing suppliers on sustainability. And of course, transparency is key when you're looking at the supplier rating platforms that EcoVadis, SEDEX, but it can become just a sort of paper pushing exercise, and it's very difficult to actually move from compliance to influence. So, it's one thing to make your suppliers sign papers saying they, use organic products, for example, but it's much more difficult to actually ensure that this is actually being implemented and to check that on the long term. Next slide, please. So just to get a little bit more into details about which goods and services are most critical for our industry, ITP did a risk mapping for the supply chain back in 2013, and what we found in terms of when we looked at the level of spending, the level of social and environmental impacts, the visibility, so the fact that our companies were more or less exposed publicly, and the existing measures on these topics, we found that seafood, bed linen, agency staff were the 3 highest risks for our industry, followed by the other ones you can read here. And that really helped our members prioritizing some of their policies on those topics, on those commodities. Let me give you a look at what they can do more practically. So our members have addressed those risks through mostly policies at group level, but also good practice at property level. So I've taken the 3 main sources of supply that we've looked at. The first one is food supply. Once again, looking at commodities, what we found was very efficient from some of our members, including Hyatt and Woodbred, was actually to study. They've studied and identified their key expenditure and developed commodity-specific policies for their top expenditure. So let's say, one company is spending most of its procurement money on products like cotton, sugar, cocoa, fish, and seafood. Well, they will develop specific policies on that. And then what can a policy look like? Well, that can be similar to what Hyatt developed by sourcing from local suppliers, making sure that menus include at least 5 local products, prioritizing local suppliers rather than international procurement, like Ashton mentioned, like Louisa mentioned for TUI. In terms of labor supply, members of ITP usually go through global codes of conduct. That's for supporting human rights mainly, and their business partners and suppliers are expected to maintain the same standards. They will have responsible supply chain policies, preventing forced labor in supply chain, and they will apply review of supply chain risks for the labor supply. Labor supply is really one of the top risks we're looking at the International Tourism Partnership this year. The Modern Slavery Act in the UK has pushed a lot of awareness of the problem and has pushed our membership to really look at how we can start addressing the risks arising from labor supply worldwide. Finally, in terms of services supply, when you look at companies providing, small companies providing laundry services, washing service, security services, we found that some of our members, like Peninsula, for example, have worked in certain cases to actually really upskill their partners to make their operations more water efficient, energy efficient, to reduce the impact that those services were creating. And we've seen a long-term impact in helping and supporting social enterprises where they were operating. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to tell you a few words about our ITP goals, which define how our members strive to make a positive contribution to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, both in their own operation and in their supply chain. Next slide, please. So we believe that, and it's something you often hear in the tourism and the travel and tourism world, and we really try to question this and to ask ourselves, well, how actually is it a force for good, and how can we measure that, and how we can have a better impact? And it's, if you go to the next slide, please. We've worked with our members, so our 14 hotel companies, to agree on a global and common horizon for the hotel sector towards 2030. So it's looking at 4 key areas that we believe are the most critical for our industry. One is youth employment. and our goal is to collectively impact 1 million young people through employability programs, and that's doubling our current impact on youth employment. On water, our goal is to embed water stewardship programs, reduce the number of people affected by water scarcity, improve water use efficiency, and identify the ways to address water scarcity. And that's going to be relying on a lot of collaboration with local suppliers, commodities, but also improving and collaborating with smaller actors at community level to improve access to water, for example, working with local NGOs, working with local water suppliers to actually achieve this goal. On human rights, our goal is to raise awareness of human rights risks, embed human rights into corporate governance. That's through human rights policies, for example. It's also to address risks arising in the labor supply chain and during hotel construction. So these two last points are going to be critical in terms of reducing the risks of modern slavery, which arise when hotel companies sometimes rely on third-party recruitment agencies. This is one of the highest risks when workers don't necessarily can be employed temporarily and will not have the necessary rights and protection to do the same job. And we're starting to collaborate to address these risks, both at the labor supply chain level and further along the line, if you looking at how workers on hotel construction sites can also be protected and benefit from our sectoral collaboration. Finally, our goal in carbon is to embrace science-based targets and to encourage the wider industry to join us. So that means we encourage our members to work with their suppliers. That can be, for example, food and beverage suppliers, to really question how they can make a big impact on carbon reduction and drive carbon reductions at scale, more than replacing light bulbs by LEDs, but what can we actually do to scale up production and align with the science-based target to 2030. So that was it from me. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any question further on.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for your interesting presentation. We look forward to the Q&A session, and as another reminder to all attendees, please note that you can send questions to Nicholas from now on through the question box. He will be answering them at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. For our third presentation, Marie Balmont, CSR Director from the group Pierre Vacances Center Parks, will talk about Village Nature. Since 2005, she's the Group Sustainability Director for Pierre Vacances Center Parks, leader in tourism residence in Europe. In addition to defining the group CR strategy, action plan, and project, her mission is to accompany the development of new and innovative offers and leisure activities embedding values of sustainable development. Marie, you have 15 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena, and thank you very much for inviting me to share what we do to work with SMEs on our new project. So in a nutshell, the group Pierre Vacances Center Parks, as you said, is the leader in local tourism in Europe. We develop, construct, and operate tourism destinations, so residences and resorts. We have 3 brands, Center Parks, Pierre Vacances, and Adagio Apart-Hotel, which are the main 3 brands. About 9,000 employees in Europe and 350 destinations. So I'm here to talk about Village Nature and how we integrated SMEs within our strategy to deliver an innovative project. Village Nature is a new destination in close to Paris that we just celebrate the opening yesterday, actually. It's the outcome of a strategic partnership between, no, previous slide, please. A strategic partnership between Pierre Vacances and Euro Disney. Euro Disney brought creativity and storytelling, and Pierre et Vacances brought the concept, the expertise on development, construction, and operation. So as I said, it's a short break destination at the outskirts of Paris, expecting 1.4 million visitors per year. It's about 900 accommodation units, so housing, a big central facilities, which is aquatic park. It's the biggest in Europe today. A lot of recreational spaces, shop and restaurants, and more than 600 jobs. The core vision of this project is harmony between man and nature. And this is aligned with strong commitment to sustainability. This was the concept that was designed in 2006 when we started to work on this project, and that we made alive throughout the development. Next, please. So as I was telling you, this vision of harmony between man and nature has inspired the design of the accommodation, the green architecture and the suspended gardens, for example, on all accommodation and housing. Next. But it also inspired all the universe of experiences that we offer to guests today. So this is the aquatic park called the Aqua Lagon that you see on the picture. The extraordinary gardens, which is gardens designed around the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, and wind. The farm, with a lot of leisure activities for kids to pet animals and to discover gardening, a lot of workshop around the farm activities. We have the shop and restaurants, and we have Enchanted Forest, which is a place for outdoor games for children. Next, please. So Village Nature is also unique by its commitment to sustainability for a project of this scale. We work since 2006 with a charity in the UK called Bioregional, and we developed an approach around the philosophy of the One Planet Living. We have an action plan on 10 targets with concrete objectives that we wrote in 2008 and that we follow up and implemented throughout those years, and that we are now projecting objective for the operational phase until 2020. The key commitments around this action plan is around zero carbon. So making the best use of renewable energy. We have the chance to have geothermal energy on this location. And so 100% of the energy used for the hot water and heating will be covered by renewable energy, by this geothermy. Also, the proximity to Paris is allowing us to have a great ambition regarding the access by train by our guests. So about 30% of the guests coming by train. This is our ambition. The low carbon construction, the local procurement strategy. The other key commitment is about maximizing benefits to local community. Around biodiversity as well, we have zero loss of protected species and development of habitats that are positive to welcome new species. And last but not least, promotion of sustainable lifestyles, which is at the end what also we are here for destination of this scale. So the work with SMEs, so next please. The work with SMEs was completely strategic to deliver both the experience and the sustainability commitment. During construction, one of our main targets was to improve economic local benefits, as I said. So we organized construction with separate trade contractors to build 100% of the sites, including all the housing, but also all the primary work of landscaping, road, grid, etc. So except for the Aqua Lagoon, for which we had a contract with a general contractor, All the site was developed with separate trade contractors. The result of this is that we have about more than 70% of the contracts in value since the beginning of the construction work that were given to small local contractors, including 1/3 of all the plants that came from local nurseries. The final data is compiling, but this is about the global figures. We were also able to impose an objective regarding insertion hours to our subcontractors, and this objective was way overpassed. The key for this is to plan and start working with local partners way in advance, such as the chambers of trade, in order to help local companies prepare to answer the tenders. Working with small local companies, the sustainability specifications for construction, such as the choice of materials. We added these specifications on the tender documents, and we were able to get back 100% of the certificates on wood because we were looking for FSC or PEFC wood, paintings, floorings, etc. It also helped us to have more flexibility in the contract management with those subcontractors, and we added some good practices and additional actions on the way. For example, we recovered, as we saw the possibility during construction, we recovered 100% of the wood that was cut on site in order to make all the outdoor layout and furnitures. So this was about for the construction site. On operation, the same ideas partnership with SME is also key to deliver the guest experience that we envisioned. For fully integrated touristic resorts, we have many different and specific expertise that we have to assemble. And we outsource most of them. We have about 1,000 people that worked on site, and out of them, 600 are employed by subcontractors. And many of those contracts are done with SMEs, such as the leisure activities, the restaurants, and the shops. For the shops and restaurants, this is for us a very innovative strategy for Village Nature because, for example, for Center Parks, we usually outsource to one major food and support services company. The reason to choose SMEs for Village Nature was to find brands with strong identity to reinforce the positioning of Village Nature. So we work with a local baker, we work with Nature et Découverte, we work with with a lot of SMEs with strong identity and brand. Of course, the difficulty for this is to have this tailor-made business approach. So the negotiation are a little bit more difficult because we have to run it with each partners in order to help them find their own business model within those new parameters of operating on a tourism resort. So the global conclusion of this is that working with SMEs today is allowing us to improve our local economic footprint, build and implement a progress plan with the partners in the long run, be more flexible in the contract management, and have a better traceability. But of course, it requires more time and resources for planning and coordination. And when we replicate on a larger scale, the risk is to multiply small local contracts and to lose track visibility and our negotiations. So this is something we really need to tackle if we want to develop local procurement and contracting. And this is our strategy at the group level for Pierre et Vacances Center Parks. To give you an idea, today our purchase budget is about 660 million euros per year, and 10% of this budget are contracts on which we have no visibility. So globally, it's local contracts. And so if we want to continue to tackle the strategy of local procurement, we need to have a better management of those local contracting. So we're using today digital tools to consolidate and follow all contracts signed locally and manage the negotiation. And the phase 2 of this work is to create a procurement platform accessible to other companies in tourism or service industry, which is a tool both for SMEs to have access to new contracts and for other companies to have access to contract with local SMEs negotiating with contract negotiated by PVCP. So globally, this is our strategy. I think that we're at the very beginning of the story of working with local SMEs, but this is definitely the way to sustainability on our industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie. To all attendees, please now send your questions to Marie and any other questions you would like to debate during the Q&A session, which is about to start. Thank you, Marie, for closing this this presentation session very nicely. I think it's an important point that you have made in terms of key drivers of Pierre Vacances on how you engage with SMEs and what are the benefits of doing that. I would like to hear more about TUI and about ITP on their views on this specific topic. So if you could start, Shane, and then Nicholas provide also their view. 2 minutes, please, answering the question.
Sorry, Helena, is that the question that was posed on the chat or just now to us all?
Yes, it is.
So the question is to what are the drivers for large companies to be involved with SMEs in driving more sustainable practice?
Exactly.
Yeah, right. From TUI's perspective, just briefly, certainly we find that more sustainable experiences and suppliers, both hotels and excursions, drive. Obviously, we have very long-term sustainability objectives. We are only ever as healthy as an organisation as the destinations and communities that we operate within. But in the shorter term, we can see very clear links between customer satisfaction questionnaires and hotels which are sustainably certified. We see on our excursions that the elements of the TUI Collection Excursions which rate highest in customer questionnaires are those local flavour and sustainability themes and during the excursion. So people have a richer experience when they're eating fresh local food and engaging with local people. So there's definite quality benefits there. But on the flip side, also from a risk mitigation perspective, it's important that we work with suppliers that are operating to our standards on environmental, social, working practices, etc.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Thank you, Elena. I would say to better engage with your supply chain on sustainability, I mean, it sounds like you need to go externally, but I would say companies need to start internally as well. I think for sustainability to be better taken in account when you deal with suppliers, sustainability needs to come out of CSR teams and to start trickling down within the organization. So having those conversations about responsible procurement with your procurement teams takes time. It does take equal time to start talking about labor and human rights in the supply chain, and to have that discussion with legal teams, with HR teams, takes a very long time. It's not one to take lightly, and I really believe large companies will be much more efficient at dealing with their suppliers when they actually are aware of the issues and will be able to connect internally better on these issues and share information.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. I have a question for Mahi, coming from one of our participants. And the question is related about contracts. So you were talking to a great deal in terms of contracts, but what is the criteria for an SME to be engaged with the Pierre Vacances? Do you have any guidelines or a specific criteria that the company have to meet?
Yes, of course, but this really depends on the tender on which we are working. So there's some specific business criteria to make sure that the company is well organized in order to deliver the service or the product. And this is for the construction phase, for example, we worked way in advance with the Chamber of Trade locally to make sure that the small and medium-sized companies locally are organized in order to meet the criteria to enter the tenders, because it's something to build a 900 accommodation in 2 years. So of course the SMEs have to be prepared to respond on those very technical business and economic criteria. But we also have any specific environmental specifications, and this we worked very closely with the procurement team to make sure that those specifications meet the tender. For example, if we're working on linen, we will find different specification than if we're looking for construction material, etc. So we really take the key strategic tenders and we work on specific demands regarding environmental specifications. So this is a very tailor-made approach as well, and often we need to meet with the suppliers during the tender because sometimes sustainability, they are not as mature as big companies to tackle sustainability issues, and so we need to really explain what we are looking for, etc., etc. So this is very much time-consuming as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mahi. We have another question in relation to green awards and certification, and I'm interested to know from you, Jane, what is the business case for hotels to achieve sustainability certification?
There's various elements to the business case from the supplier's point of view. First of all, we highlight sustainably certified product through our marketing channels. So there's and quite a few of our websites have the option to sustainably certified product. So that's of benefit from a sales point of view to the hotelier. Also, our hoteliers are able to track cost savings by reducing water, energy, waste, chemical use, etc. Colleague engagement, higher customer satisfaction. We can see a very clear correlation, as I mentioned before, between satisfaction scores and sustainably certified hotels. But I think also what's interesting, we can track this by the research we do with our, not just our customers, but with holidaymakers more widely across all our major European source markets, is that there is increasing expectation from holidaymakers that tour operators and hoteliers offer a more demonstrably sustainable experience, and we can see that through the same questions that we ask year after year. We can see quite statistically significant shifts over the last 4 to 5 years. So we've got the evidence to back up that the public is becoming increasingly demanding of more transparency and increasingly demanding of respected brands such as TUI that we will have done the vetting, we will have done the training, the capacity building with our supply chain to make sure we're offering more sustainable experiences.
Thank you very much, Jane. We have other questions in relation to, this is to ITP and to Nicholas. There are some participants that are interested in knowing if your impact assessment tools on resource use, if they are suitable for the use by SMEs, or if they are rather for big companies, and if that is the case, how they will engage SMEs to get to the same targets as you are proposing.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, those tools, they for a small company, I mean, we're talking about simple Excel sheets. What we've worked on and really provided is a methodology more than anything. So that can be applied at any level. Even for less than a 20-room hotel, you could measure your water and your carbon consumption in the same way. In terms of goal setting, of target setting, some of them are specifically related to hotel companies that are quite large brands, but some of them I'm thinking about carbon and water now, and human rights very much are applicable in hotels of any size. In terms of we're suggesting that companies align with science-based targets, which can be calculated for companies of any size. On water, it's about having a thorough approach to water stewardship, which can also be applied in any company. It's about following some key steps. So yeah, I mean, we're hoping that this is going to be picked up by the widest number of companies possible. And of course, any actor or hotel company who would be interested to know more, feel free to get in touch. We are here to help and to support.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I just wanted to make sure, Nicholas, if those tools are available free from the ITP website, or if they have to...
They are, yeah, everything is free on the website.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, so I recommend all the participants to go and look at the website and to download the tools. There is another question also that is very much interesting, coming from Morocco, and also from other participants, related to biodiversity, because large tourism players and resorts are also consumers of territorial space for biodiversity. So how do large business such as your businesses, they are monitoring the impact on biodiversity? So if Jane and Marie could reply to that one, please.
Should I start? Because you activated the sound, maybe. This is Marie. So it's a huge, it's a very important subject. And as you saw for Village Nature, it was one of our key objectives. Today, we tackle biodiversity at the very beginning of the project when we choose the land on which we want to develop. So our objective is to be on the less biodiversity sensitive land as possible. So when in a country where regulation exists, of course we work around those regulations. In countries where regulation are less present, then we need to make sure we carry the same rule abroad. I'm thinking about China, for example, which is a country in which we are developing right now. So the objective at the beginning is to, of course, limit our impact and work with local authorities to see ways in order to compensate as much as possible our impact. On Village Nature, for instance, we chose a land which was very close to an urban area. So this is very positive in terms of biodiversity opportunity, because it was agricultural land. And so we didn't have to really developed on forest, but we kind of recovered this land, and now the capacity of the site to welcome biodiversity is as much as it was before we came. Today we have ecological plan, management plan on each resort, especially the new ones, and we follow up the number of species. We have biodiversity indicators on each of them, and we need to report every year on the presence of the protected species that were there before we came. The difficulty for us is to have one global or one or two, but global indicators regarding biodiversity, because biodiversity is very local, is a very local issue, and we're talking about species. And when we try to look at a broader scale and construct a global indicator, it's already today very difficult for us, but it's a work in progress.
Thank you very much, Marie. Jane, could we hear more about TUI and how you work on biodiversity and engaging SMEs as well in this monitoring and reporting on that area as well?
Yes, of course. Our impact on biodiversity is via various channels, but because we're so large, we are conscious that we do have a significant impact on biodiversity. So our largest group of suppliers is our hotel supply chain. So that's why we work with robust certification schemes recognised by Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which will include a range of biodiversity indicators and actions that hotels have to take. So monitoring and reducing water, waste, chemical use, and energy is key, and protecting biodiversity on their premises. So that's through our hotel supply chain. With our excursion providers, we also have the environmental checklist in order to reduce the impact on biodiversity through the excursions. We also have a number of projects, particularly through the foundation, tackling biodiversity on a more destination-led level. So work with in Cape Verde to reduce waste from hotels, from all the hotels. We've done similar work in Rhodes, work currently in Curacao as well. And then through the certifications we work with, we can identify, so particularly with Travel Life, we can identify where there are destination issues with, say, waste management, and then as an industry, with our industry peers, address destinations about those issues. And specifically on biodiversity, again, through the TUI Care Foundation, we have targets for animal protection, with 1 million animals that we want to protect by 2020, primarily focused for the moment on turtle protection and elephant protection. Got a lot of work still to do in that area.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. Yes, indeed, we have a lot of work to do, and I'm very happy that the companies that are in the forefront of sustainability in tourism are moving fast to meet also the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you also, Jane, in your presentation, you have mentioned about the materiality issue and how useful the SDG framework would be for assessing the materiality of your operations. I would like to have a sense also from Pierre Vacances and from ITP on how do you see the SDGs as being a framework for reporting? Do you think that could be useful, because still the tourism sector is not reporting on SDGs? So it would be interesting to see your views in terms of how the future would look like and how you see the transition of your actual reports towards to reporting to aligned to SDGs. So first, if you can start, Nicholas, and then Jane, and then Marie.
Yeah, absolutely. Our hotel member companies have actually started to report and align their annual reporting with the UN SDGs. Further to that, I'll say again the ITP goals that we've agreed with all our companies on our 4 key areas are, you know, in a way to better report on the contribution towards those SDGs. And I would say, yeah, I mean, as long as companies in the tourism sector identify their key critical SDGs, the ones they want to impact and the ones they can have leverage, then I think this is a natural way forward.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse the point that Nicola just made about prioritising the SDGs that are most relevant to your organisation, because it's very difficult to report against all 17. But yes, we've certainly identified the ones that most closely relate to our key targets, and we will be referencing them or continue to reference them and measure against them through our reporting. I would say that not just in tourism, but generally looking at all companies are doing this in a myriad of weird and wonderful ways. There are no necessarily clear ways or one way to do this. They're quite a flexible tool, but still very much a useful framework.
Thank you. And Marie?
Yes, I completely agree with my colleague. I think that the first step is to identify the critical SDGs that we tackled within the framework of the strategy that we are all already implementing. So this is actually for us the work that we're doing today, because we are preparing for the annual reporting 16-17. And this is the first year that we will report on the SDGs that we will tackle. And I think the first step is to make sure that those SDGs, that companies have concrete objectives around those key SDGs that they have already identified, and maybe making a global map on what are the SDGs that are tackled first by the tourism industry, and to see what are the discrepancies will be, I think, very interesting. Next, of course, is to benchmark performance. This is a question for us, a key question for us, because we want to see how we are, in comparison with Club Med and with Accor, etc., etc. I work a lot with Club Med, Accor, at least those companies that are located in France, and it's very difficult for us to benchmark because our activities are similar but quite different still. Energy consumption, water, a hotel room is very different than apartments. So we are still working on this. But I think that the first stage is, to map what are the SDGs that are most tackled by tourism companies today, and also in comparing on what position they are in the value chain of tourism, because there's a lot of industries that make up the tourism industry overall.
Thank you very much. So as we are closing this this webinar, I just wanted to make a final remark on the need of large companies to engage small and medium enterprise companies. This engagement cannot only be done through contracts, through business engagement, but also in trying to see how these small and medium enterprises perceive the current business models. Are these business models suitable for the destinations that they are placed on? So we have heard today some good examples from TUI and Pierre Vacances, and I'm sure there are many more. But we still know that the engagement is uneven depending on the country and depending on the destinations that they are located. So I really appreciate that there is a lot of things being done. There is also the need, as it was said today, that to invest. So there is the TUI Care Foundation that is also investing on the capacity of local communities so that they can deliver better services, but not only improving the livelihoods of their communities. So I am looking forward to seeing you at the next website, the next webinar of the 10YFP Sustainable Tourism Program that will take place in the week of 18th of October, where we will be presenting solutions on financing sustainable tourism in SMEs. I think this is the next topic, mainly because this financing is already happening. We need to direct the right investment to the right development. So I wish that we can all count on your participation. Please be aware that all your questions will be answered later on by our speakers. So please contact Svitlana Miklayeva if you feel that your questions have not been addressed. We have received many of them. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.